Edom's unbrotherly attitude toward Israel by Ginzberg. From Kadesh, Moses sent ambassadors to the king of Edom, requesting him to permit Israel to travel through his territory. For, thought Moses, when our father Jacob with only a small troop of men planned to return to his father's house, which was not situated in Esau's possessions, he previously sent a messenger to him to ask his permission. How much more then does it behoove us, a people of great numbers, to refrain from entering Edom's territory before receiving his sanction to do so? Moses' ambassadors had been commissioned to bear the following message to the king of Edom. From the time of our grandfather Abraham, there was a promissory note to be redeemed, for God had imposed it upon him that in Egypt his seed should be enslaved and tortured. It had been thy duty, as well as ours, to redeem this note, and thou knowest that we have done our duty whereas thou wert not willing. God had, as thou knowest, promised Abraham that those who had been in bondage in Egypt should receive Canaan for their possession as a reward. That land, therefore, is ours, who were in Egypt, and thou who didst shirk the redemption of the debt, hast now claim to our land. Let us then pass through thy land until we reach ours. 620 Know also that the patriarchs in their graves sympathized with our sufferings in Egypt, and whenever we called out to God, he heard us, and sent us one of his ministering angels to lead us out of Egypt. Consider then that all thy weapons will avail thee not if we implore God's aid, who will then at once overthrow thee and thy hosts. For this is our inheritance, and the voice of Jacob never proves ineffectual. 621 That thou mayest not, however, plead that our passage through thy land will bring thee only annoyances and no gain, I promise thee that, although we draw drink out of a well that accompanies us on our travels, and are provided with food through the manna, we shall nevertheless buy water and food from thy people, that ye may profit by our passage. This was no idle promise, for Moses had actually asked the people to be liberal with their money, that the Edomites might not take them to be poor slaves, but might be convinced that in spite of their stay in Egypt, Israel was a wealthy nation. Moses also pledged himself to provide the cattle with muzzles during their passage through Edom, that they might do no damage to the land of the dwellers there. With these words he ended his message to the king of Edom. To the right and to the left of thy land may we pillage and slaughter, but in accord with God's words, we may not touch thy possession. But all these prayers and pleadings of Moses were without avail, for Edom's answer was in the form of a threat. Ye depend upon your inheritance, upon the voice of Jacob, which God answers, and I too shall depend upon my inheritance, the hand and sword of Esau. Israel now had to give up their attempt to reach their land through Edom's territory, not, however, through fear, but because God had prohibited them from bringing war upon the Edomites, even before they had heard from the embassy that Edom had refused them the right of passage. The neighborhood of the godless brings disaster, as Israel was to experience, for they lost the pious Aaron on the boundary of Edom and buried him on Mount Hor. The cloud that used to precede Israel had indeed been accustomed to level all the mountains, that they might move on upon level ways, but God retained 3 mountains in the desert: Sinai as the place of the revelation, Nebo as the burial place of Moses, and Hor, consisting of a twin mountain, as a burial place for Aaron. Apart from these 3 mountains, there were none in the desert, but the cloud would leave little elevations on the place where Israel pitched camp, that the sanctuary might thereupon be set up. 622.